Hello again, everyone. It's good to have you with us for this event. It figures to be an exceptional one that doesn't need any build-up.
Are you ready?
Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop fighting.
This is the main event of the evening.
Athletes, huddle up. It's time to begin. Get focused. Let's go.
Hello, listeners and viewers. If you're watching this live today, if not, you're going to catch this podcast tomorrow as a podcast that will be living for eternity in the international webs of mystery, I guess, right?
That's right.
I don't know. Nonetheless, hey, welcome to One-on-One Live with Coach Blue and Athletic Director Marissa.
Hello.
We do the show every week. It's a live call-in show where you can jump in, ask some questions. I call it a live call-in show, and believe me, we can do this if we really need to. We're flirting with a few ideas about having you guys message us with your number and then having our producer give you a call to bring you on live, rather than have a conversation going and have that abrupt phone ring. There's still a lot of little attributes of this platform that we're still teasing out, but
just trying to find the best route.
Yeah. But nonetheless, you can jump on with your questions. You can submit them through social media. Marissa's really good at keeping track of the Facebook primarily. So if that's going to be best for you, please leave your message there. We do receive messages throughout the week, and this is a chance that we get to have to chat with you guys about what maybe some solutions to mental health issues, addiction questions, relationship questions, anything that may be plaguing you with some stress on this One-on-One Live show. Blue Robinson, co-founder of Team Addict Athlete, licensed mental health therapist, licensed substance use disorder counselor. They call it a SUDSI now, but I don't even know what the acronym is. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Substance use disorder counselor.
You got it right.
Got it. And you, who are you?
I am Marissa Robinson, co-founder of Addict Athlete, athletic director, and certified recreational therapist.
The cool job, right?
Yep, the fun people.
I love it. I think you and I are going to be presenting at the Rec Therapy Conference coming up.
2-3 weeks, we're presenting at the Utah Rec Therapy Conference.
I love recreational therapy. For all of you who are listening out there that may be involved in the recovery universe, if you do not have recreational therapy as an arm of your treatment program, shame on you.
Yeah.
And you know who you are.
You got some work to do. Absolutely.
Nonetheless, hey, Marissa, before we start jumping into this, we got to give thanks to our Patreon subscribers and maybe even a little bit of humble apology for some of those that have, we've missed them as we were sending out our shirts. And so trust me, they're coming. We've been revamping the Patreon so that no one gets left behind, right?
Yes.
Just like that race we have coming up.
Exactly. If you haven't received a shirt or the other things, please let me know. There are some here because I assumed people were coming here to pick them up. So if I need to get them shipped to you, but please message me.
Nonetheless, if you'd like to jump onto Patreon and help us push this podcast out a little further, you can do so by jumping on patreon.com/addictathlete. Who are our champions, our rookies, the people that we totally love that help us push this podcast out a little further?
Absolutely. So our champion level Patreon subscribers are Shad and Freya Robison, Ron and Dee Loesch, and Andrew Baird. Thank you, champions.
Yes.
Pro level, Gary Thurston. Rookies are Sione and Mary Inuk, Sherry Polson, Earl Dyer, and Wendell Wood. Thank you, guys. Our super fans, Karen Hardy, Steve Riggs, Tracy Whitby, Jerem Thurston, Tara Butson, Holly Davies, Scott Foster, Brett Frew, Chris Williams, Sensei KP Brown, Patrick Forsyth, Brock Ellerman, and Christy Case.
Oh, man. And all of you who have subscribed by doing that $2 a month subscription, where if you pay in advance, it's like $12 or something.
Like $16
bucks.
Yeah,
that gives you everything you need throughout the year and all of the bonus content. So stay tuned because we'll be dropping a new episode of the Patreon platform here in the next day or so. So stay tuned. Nonetheless, we also have addict2athlete.org that you're going to want to know so that you can register for our upcoming 2023 events. Right now, registration for the No One Left Behind 3-on-3 half marathon is open. This is an amazing run that we put together, and one that you have to do with at least 3 or more of your friends or cohorts, that you have to stay no less than 15 feet apart from each other. And you got to stay together. And you got to finish together. So really, you're only as fast as your slowest runner.
Yeah, because just unlike recovery, you can't do it alone. You have to do it with a team. So you start together, finish together, and
and you have a journey in the middle of that.
Absolutely.
So this is held in June in Spanish Fork, Utah. The trail and the path that we've chosen to host this is gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
It is absolutely beautiful. We've made some revamps since last year's event, so we're going to have a few more aid stations because for some of those that finished a little bit later, it got a little warm, a little hot.
Warm. Yeah.
There are no cutoff times for this event, which means you don't have to have a runner be worried about just go ahead and finish without me.
Yeah.
Because there's no time limits. You'll finish when you finish, and we'll be there to present you with your medals and all the liquids for rehydration, right?
It's a great start for if you've ever never done a half marathon, because then you also get to do it with some friends and not feel like you're being left behind because you're doing it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you're one of those like people that love to plan ahead, September, right? This is the month of recovery, and we have our Addict to Athlete 5K. We call it the Proxy Run. It's a recovery run that we have you come and run for an individual that may have lost their battle to addiction or mental health, or just someone that's still out there struggling that you want to recognize the love that you have for them to run proxy for them. It is an emotional, very supportive event. And again, it's an event that we've really put a lot of heart into because of the sensitivity of the subject matter. And so really what we've discovered throughout the process of Addict to Athlete is movement equals healing.
Yeah.
There's something very healing about this event. It happens every September. Again, we're doing it in Spanish Fork, Utah. Spanish Fork, Utah has been very gracious to Addict to Athlete, and we've really just enjoyed the ease of what it can offer. And so jump on, again, addicttoathlete.org and check out the proxy run. I think it's open too, is it not?
Yep. And I just posted the links in our comments. So if you want to just go there, you can go there and register already.
And if for some reason you are out in the ethos and you're not anywhere near close to this, we can do this virtually for you. We can send you your bib numbers, everything that we have, so that you can do this with a group of people wherever you are. And that's what we see a lot of, right? We see a lot of families and maybe treatment programs and whatnot registering for this. We send you all the material that you need to carry it through. And we love to see the social media posts afterwards from all over the country.
Absolutely.
So, let's jump into it. Any other announcements we need to chat about with these folks?
Not that I can think of off the bat.
Okay. Stage case, go to the website, addicttoathlete.org. Well, Marissa, we've had quite a bit of a traveling this last couple of weeks. We went down to Las Vegas, Nevada to run the Hard Rock 10K.
Yeah.
It seemed like we got home and repacked and then drove down to St. George, Utah for the Red Mountain Heavy Half, which we went down there and ran as a team. Me and a few other folks that I bumped into that we'll talk about here in a bit, all under the banner of recovery and kind of like the erase and replace philosophy.
Yep.
One of our questions that we received is, what exactly does erase and replace mean? And as I was kind of pondering that, I mean, that's something that we coined years and years ago.
Yep.
How would you describe what the erase and replace philosophy is, specifically in that rec therapy type mindset?
So erase and replace is just about taking negative behaviors, negative feelings, negative experiences, and kind of switching them 180 degrees and making it something positive. So if you're taking your addiction, you're switching it and you're erasing it and replacing it with healthy recreation, athletics, sports, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing, right? Is specifically when this listener had asked that question, they said, well, what about relationships? To erase a relationship and replace it with someone of greater value, how does that equate into the emotional components of what that means? Now, erasing an old feeling, an old relationship or whatnot, doesn't mean that you're going to forget about it, that it's going to be out of sight, out of mind. In fact, we get this a lot during the proxy run and whatnot, where we talk about erase and replace because, your loved one isn't erased.
Yeah, right? We're not trying to erase
them and the memory. We don't want to do that. And they're certainly not going to be replaced.
Yeah.
But the emotional dead weight that is attached to it is
the
kind of
negative things that are part of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, when we look at this, we're like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah.
It's the same principle. And
get rid of what doesn't help and Yeah.
Absolutely. And when we talk about replacing it with things of greater value, that means multiple attributes, multiple like aspects of replacing that void that was left. Meaning, if you have a relationship that's been toxic and you need to erase that relationship, it means filling that with not just another relationship, but also with maybe some social outlets, maybe some hobby type, interests or pursuits. It's about being able to invest in a lot of different things to fill that void rather than just one person.
Yeah. It's so important to have multiple things so that, if something ever happens, we talk a lot about sports, and we've had a lot of people on our podcast that, we've had professional athletes, and oftentimes they become so engulfed in that as a profession, but it also becomes everything of who they are, that when they retire or they get injured or something else happens, all of a sudden they have nothing else to lean on because all they were was a football player or a swimmer. And then they really struggle. And a lot of people, mental health, some of them fall into addiction. Some of them, just struggle with a lot of things because they don't have multiple things. And it's so important to have balance.
So, it's a great question, and it's one of those things that we adhere the program to. But again, it doesn't mean like, forgetting and moving on. It means being able to learn the lessons from whatever experience it was, be able to utilize those for something positive, and then really increase, the likelihood of success by, entering into a mindset of abundance, more positiveness, more, like outlets, more resources. So it's a great question, but it also kind of flows into what we've been talking about recently with a few folks out here, which is how do you get your mind right when you're beginning this whole process? One of the hardest things about recovery isn't so much the stopping of the use of the drug or the substance or the chemical. It's about retraining your mind and reprocessing kind of like your thought process. We say this after 28 days of physical, removal from substances, alcohol, what have you.
Yeah.
Your body no longer needs it, no longer desires it.
Yeah.
But the mental part, how long does that last?
Oh, it can last years.
Yeah, if not decades or lifetimes, right?
Yeah.
So, I learned this years ago. I was watching a show, probably circa 2001, 2002, and it was talking about a procedure that would help you eliminate opiate addiction by going under a medical procedure where they do some kind of chemical wash almost, and it floods the mind and whatnot with kind of a solution that erases the substance use. And what it does is it puts you into active withdrawal almost immediately, but you're asleep when it happens. They sedate you. So you go through the entirety of that, what do you call it?
Physical withdrawal.
Physical withdrawal, but you're unaware of it. And so when you wake up, physically no longer addicted. What do you think the success rate of that was?
I could imagine for some it's probably good, but others not, because I know many people who going through the withdrawal helps them look at that substance a little differently, maybe more negatively, or, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to use and have to go through the withdrawal again. So they're learning that as a natural consequence. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm sure it depends on the person.
You're absolutely spot on. For a majority of the folks that did this, what they realized is that the mental components of addiction were heavier and more difficult to manage because they didn't experience the in real time sickness. And now that's kind of a hard thing to think about, right?
Yeah.
Because what we found over the years is that things with like medicated assisted therapy and whatnot, I used to think that used to postpone or almost even avoid the withdrawal, because you're just taking the substance as a replacement to avoid getting sick. Now, I've been humbled quite profoundly by misjudging what that truly meant. But on the flip side of that, when people go cold turkey off that, one of the biggest indicators that they're going to have longer success is the remembrance of how bad they felt and how sick they got. And that's not always a deterrent, but it's like, I don't ever want to have to experience that again.
Yeah.
And so the mental process begins when you endure something so heavy. Now, granted, doesn't work for everyone. There's still people that go through that and continue to use later on.
Yeah.
But natural consequences to behaviors and actions that we put ourselves through are huge. Why are natural consequences so much more powerful than manufactured consequences?
Manufactured consequences obviously are made up. And
Punitive
they're often
too.
made up by a person or an institution. And so often the person that's receiving that as a consequence just has anger, frustration. Any of the emotions are tied to the person that dealt out the consequence, not to the behavior that caused it, or themselves, or how they could change it. And natural consequences are just naturally tied to behaviors. And so it's easier to see it as the exact consequence of that behavior. So it's easier to learn from it than, the police officer that gives you a ticket for speeding. You're angry at the police officer, or, your radar gun that didn't work, or whatever else. You're never really frustrated with yourself often for driving too fast.
So good analogy.
Right?
Think about that for a sec, listeners. A manufactured consequence is that officer pulling you over and giving you a ticket. That's a manufactured consequence. The natural consequence would be when you take that turn a little too quick and you roll over and you kill someone, right?
Yeah.
Or you damage your car.
Exactly.
That's a natural consequence. The speeding ticket is a manufactured consequence. How many of you guys have continued to speed after you've got a speeding ticket?
Yeah.
Me.
Most people.
Right?
Yeah. You just get better at watching for cops, not better at driving safer or slower.
But I'd love to know the research for those that have had a really horrific accident because of that, right? I mean, chances are you might make sure that seat belt's buckled. You might make sure that you're going the speed limit. You make sure when you take that corner again that you don't do it so
do it
quickly.
a little bit slower. Yeah.
And so I see a lot of natural consequences with that. When it snows here in Utah, it takes Utah drivers about 9 months to learn how to drive in snow, and then a couple of days to forget how. And so, we see natural consequences all the time, which sucks because I've seen so many accidents on the freeway that cars are just totally mangled. And then when you come home that same route and the snow's melted, it's like, dude, how bad does that suck?
Yeah.
Right?
It's all gone. Clear, blue, sunny day. Ugh.
So in order to prepare yourself for what's to come in your recovery, it's important to understand that there's this mental kind of combat process that you've got to prepare yourself for. And if you're not prepared mentally for what's to come, chances are you're going to throw in the towel and create an escape hatch, right? The mental parts of what addiction recovery truly entails is going to be so universally different for each person, but there are some common threads, right? I mean, stress, they say, is the number one cause of relapse. Now, go figure. So the number one thing should be avoid every module of stress. Could we do that?
Not really possible, no.
It's not possible. And the reason why it's not possible is because we always think when I say the word stress, all of you started thinking about the bad stuff. There's such thing as positive stress.
Yeah.
What are some examples of positive stress, do you think?
Job promotion, or moving into a new place to live, there's just added stress to it.
Yeah, children growing up, moving out,
there are good things
vacations.
that happen. Yeah, vacations, 100%.
So, dude, how much positive stress did we have that turned into negative stress on our little cruise excursion? Right?
Yeah.
Talk about roller coaster. Holy cow.
Yeah.
So the thing is if stress is the number one cause of relapse, and it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, how prepared do you have to be for this mental combat?
Yeah, you've got to start, building ways to, coping skills to deal with stress, having people to talk to when things come up. Yeah, there's learning some grit to just be able to bear through it sometimes and know that it will get better.
You bring up some awesome points, and we're going to talk about grit here in a little bit. But first of all, let's say that you're in recovery. Maybe you got a few months under your belt. How important do you think it would be, Marissa, as you're preparing and kind of training for mental combat, to recognize authentically what's going on instead of manufacturing your own set of rules for what you're experiencing? Meaning, let's say you've been clean for a couple months. You started this job. You're doing everything that the judge, the court, whatever has required of you, and then you get this letter in the mail, and it says, "Aha, we found you. We are going to now garnish your paycheck because you haven't paid taxes or child support or what have you to the tune of how much." And so you get your first check, and it's more than half cut.
Yeah.
what do you do then? Like, how do you recognize the very first step of mental combat is recognizing what it is and what it isn't? How does someone prepare themselves for a sucker punch like that?
I don't know if you can, other than just being able to try to evaluate it. Like, look at the positive side. Like, I have a job, I can pay this, that if they didn't find me now, they will later. Like, it's not, when you run away from responsibility, when you run away from court fines, it'll find you. It may not be next week. It may just be a few years down the road. And, if you allow that to help you slip and fall, you're not going to stay up where you're at. So is it really going to be beneficial to throw in the towel? Screw them. I can't believe they would bother me. Now I have no money. And
every time I get up, they pull me down. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. But you also have to look at it as you've caused a problem in the past. You created it, and it's time to take responsibility. And the more you can do that, the less things are going to keep popping up behind you,
So if you look at it, there's that movie that we all love. It's based off a real guy, Frank Abagnale, The Catch Me If You Can.
Yes.
If even Frank Abagnale got caught, and he was a master of disguise, so to speak, and evading, the FBI.
For years, yeah.
You're going to get caught too. And there's a point where you have to recognize what you can and can't do. And to avoid a challenging situation is to really recognize and not react based off of your emotions, which is so hard because emotions, they really do guide so many decisions that we make.
Yeah.
How do we manage emotions and put those aside and think about how to problem solve this, right? We talk about this all the time. Thoughts and feelings are two very separate things.
Yeah.
Yet the trouble you're going to get into early in recovery is over feeling and under thinking.
Very true.
How do we do that? Because the initial response is going to be you open that and you're going to feel something immediately, but you had to have a thought first.
Yeah.
And the thought is, I don't think I'm going to be able to manage this.
Yeah, this is too much.
What is the emotion that follows?
Yeah, just scarcity and fear and anger, sometimes they happen so quickly on top of each other, those thoughts and feelings, that's why, and feelings are so intense that you assume that it's feelings that are garnering that, but it is some kind of thinking before. So a lot of times it's just taking time to become self-aware. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Where is this coming from? And asking yourself some of those questions. Often things that maybe a therapist would sit down and say to you, that you kind of become your own therapist, and being able to dissect things and say, okay, I'm overwhelmed. I'm really frustrated that I just need a break. I need to do some breathing. I need to something, or just feel it. That's okay. Be mad and frustrated and scream and cry. That's okay. And then what? Take another step.
Then what? And so you hear me say this quite often, listeners. I say it is your resistance to the what is that causes your suffering. So we have to stop resisting it and lean into it. You could throw in the towel and say, well, to piss on all of this kind of stuff, but all that's going to do is create more suffering. Either way, you're going to suffer, correct? I mean, you're going to suffer if you have to pay more than half of your paycheck to whatever garnishment. You're going to suffer if you throw in the towel and give the finger to the authority and get back into addiction. You're going to suffer. But it's time now to go to step 2 of this process, which is analyzing. So you're gonna manage the situation. This is how you develop mental toughness.
Yeah.
You're gonna manage it by kind of controlling emotions, by being able to dictate the whole picture. But now you analyze, and analyzing is kind of a funny thing.
Yeah.
Once your body and mind has kind of calmed, and you feel like you're a little bit more in control and have taken some stock of the situation.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's time to help your brain make that decision by really going through some steps, slowing things down. It's not always easy, but when you analyze some of the outcomes, when you play the tape all the way through, if you are in recovery and you've come through this addiction and you're at the point now where you're feeling overwhelmed, you got to remember that you are an expert in problem solving. And I said this last night in the meeting, you are an expert at problem solving. Now, the problem is you're an expert typically of problem solving to the negative.
Yeah.
Flip the script. The same principles apply. So you analyze, how do I make this happen? Maybe you call the garnish company. Maybe you look at opening up some communication to the debtor or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things you can do if you get the emotions out of the way and then start to think about possible outcomes.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever had to do that where you're like, I could do A or B? Each of them kind of suck, but one feels more appropriate because I get to dictate or be in control of it versus I'm kind of at the mercy of the what is.
Oh, yeah. I think there's many times just being a mom, there's so many situations where I just think I don't have the option of just giving up because it's not just about me, and it's not, there's more around me that are affected by my choices. And so I need to make better choices, even if it doesn't seem like they're very good options. So for me, it's easiest, but I know everyone's different, just to not allow some of those other things to be an option.
Exactly.
I just can't do it. I can't open the door to that, or I may ruin everything.
Yeah, absolutely. You can analyze so many possible outcomes. Some of them might not bring a lot of benefit. Some of them could bring some more stress. But you can problem solve this stuff into solutions if you'll put the time into coming up with the strategy. And more often than not, that's where you invite others. Yeah. And the reason why I bring this scenario up specifically is because this has happened to multiple people that we've had in the program, clients of mine, athletes themselves. And I've been amazed at the ones who just lean into it. Despite the fact there's going to be significant cuts in a lot of things they want to do, purchase, provide.
Yeah.
The ones that truly lean into it and take accountability for it and analyze their outcomes, they do something that I've noticed that not a lot of people understand. And that is, instead of reacting, they act, and they act with purpose.
Yeah.
Most of us emotionally react to these kind of things. Very few of us can emotionally act.
Yeah, think about it and act.
What's the difference between, reacting and acting?
I think a lot of reaction comes from emotions, and it's not very well thought through. And acting is analyzing the situation, looking through options, thinking about ideas, problem solving, some conflict resolution is going on, and then taking a step.
See, and I love that, because listeners, most of us are reactive people. We have to be so by nature. If your addiction was anything like, most folks that I've worked with, reaction becomes your go-to because of that self-preservation mindset. You're like, I've got to protect mine.
Yeah. And
when we do that, when we react, we may not be doing it with a full set of rules or understanding, right? It's this retaliatory type mindset of I got to get mine before you get yours.
Yeah.
Act means you do it with purpose. There's something kind of intuitive about it. It means that you're doing it with a certain kind of stature, right? You're doing it with a certain sense of mental guidance.
Well, and to me, when you're acting and you're taking action, it usually has a long-term goal in mind, rather than just a short-term make this stop, the reactionary thing. And so that long-term helps things. It may take longer, I always tell our kids, do the hard stuff now and things will get easier, rather than doing the easy and things end up getting harder. So it's doing those long-term things that you may not see a result as quickly or, as big as you'd like, but in the long run, a little bit every day, and then there's going to be something easier coming.
See, so I like that. And listeners, when you kind of boil it down to those kind of concepts, can you imagine what life would be like if you acted with purpose instead of reacted for a result?
Yeah.
When I can think of so many times when I've reacted and had things completely fall apart versus, acting with purpose and having something achievable that I didn't think was possible.
Yeah.
It's a hard kind of thing to wrap your head around, but when you do it with purpose, you'll know you do it, right?
For sure.
I mean, I think that this is in and of itself a principle that we should probably put into the playbook. And now that I think about it, and there's these mental hacks that we can find ourselves kind of using. And we use this one quite a bit. Let's say that you don't have a full skill set. Maybe you don't have the full knowledge of what to do when you're acting. The funniest thing about acting, and taking action is that it almost sounds like, you're just doing it like you're on stage or something, right? You've heard the concept, fake it until you make it.
Yep.
Right? We prefer the fake it until you become it.
Absolutely.
There's a very different thing, I think, there, right?
Yeah. You practice.
Practice. Yep. And that's what it boils down to. When you hear people say, I'm just going to fake it till I make it, or I'm going to fake it till I become it, pat them on the back and say, good job.
Yeah.
Because what most people think is that's not authentic.
Yeah.
Right? But what is it really?
It's practice.
It's practice.
That's how we get good at and get better at things that we're doing is, and pretending or practicing until it gets until you become better.
It's like this. When we had our first daughter, Brooklyn, she's 19 now, when we brought her home from the hospital, and I remember thinking, you guys are letting us take this thing? Like, what?
Yeah.
It seems like there should be like, like a security guard following. I don't know. It was weird.
A little more education.
Yeah, we get home and you walk in the house. I walk in the house. She's in her little car carrier thing. We put her on the table. We both just stand there and stare at her. And we're at our house. No nurses, no nothing.
Yeah.
And you kind of like started to bawl.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
what are we going to do?
The thing is right before we left, the nurse stopped us in the hallway, looked us both dead in the eye, and then looked at Marissa. I'm going to say this. She looked at Marissa and said, don't worry, you'll know what to do. And so we're both standing there like, oh, crap. I'm like,
I didn't know.
The nurse said you'd know what to do. Remember?
You've used that line many times when something has gone wrong.
She told you that, not me that.
Yeah.
And
the
literally
nurse said that you're the mother. You'll have motherly instincts. And I'm like, sometimes I have, but there are many times I have no idea.
I'll never forget that. And it was like, we have to fake it until we became it, right? And it's kind of funny because the parenting is one of those things where the life lessons in the books are endless, the books of life. But I remembered that, faking it until we became it. It's the same thing when people get into new positions. How do you be an amazing individual in recovery? You fake it until you become it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to fake it, what do you do? You do what sober people do. You don't use. You go to meetings. You serve.
Yeah, you watch what other people do, and you compliment that. You do the same thing, or you read. I mean, parenting. I read so many parenting books. I found parenting blogs. I found parenting chat rooms. Places I could ask questions. Places I could bring and glean, information, things I didn't know, and then I tried it. And sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. And I just had to keep doing that, One of the coolest things about that, too, is just the whole concept of how I got clean is I had to fake being a mountain biker until I became one. Just because I had the mountain bike didn't make me one. What made me one was after I met the two guys up there on the hill that kind of schooled me a little bit and told me what to do. I got all the magazines. I kind of leaned into it, and I kind of started to live that way. Yeah.
And it was that freedom and just that experience and whatnot that kind of put me into that position. Same thing as a runner. I wasn't a runner, right? I faked it until I became it. And I faked it by running.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon.
So then you're really doing
There's a difference, though, about this versus what happens when you have this imposter syndrome, too. You've heard this quite a bit. People feel like they get these imposter-type feelings when they're doing something they never thought they were capable of doing, right?
Yeah.
So being a parent or getting into a job. I've heard so many people in recovery that have gotten an amazing job, and they're like, I don't feel like I deserve this. I feel like I'm an imposter.
I tricked people into hiring me, or
I mean, I really do feel like I suckered people out of a diploma. Does that make sense? Like, but you have to take a step back and be like, no,
I did the work. I did the work.
Absolutely. And it
helps, I think, in some of those cases to really to compare yourself. There's times I've met people and I'm like, well, if they could do it, I can. Like, they have their college degree. That means I could do it. It can't be that hard. You know what I mean? Or different jobs. Like, they've learned how to do it over the years. I think I could learn how to do this and just continue trying.
Absolutely. The other mind hack about getting your mind ready for mental combat like that, it goes along really well with, faking it until you become it, is being able to start projecting outcomes, right? Meaning like forecasting what's coming. Because you have been through and experienced so many outlets that have either led to relapse, continued use, disastrous relationships, that your radar should be very much in tune with those warning signs. Not so much the triggers, triggers, but the warning signs of potential, like issues. And so when you look at like projecting, that's like playing the story all the way through. It's about saying, if I don't lean into this garnishment, what's going to happen? I'm going to be mad. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to, go back on the run. I'm going to get high again. And when you project those things, you can start really being very real with yourself and analyzing the negative parts of what that would look like.
Yeah.
The hardest thing though is that we have a hard time forecasting and projecting like the positive side
Good
of things. Our brains aren't wired to see the good. It is a skill set that you must really practice
for sure.
to make happen, huh?
Yeah.
What have you noticed about that where it's so hard to like retrain your brain to see the positive instead of the negative, specifically if you've had it so much in your life?
Oh yeah, it's naturally what we do. And then if you just have years and years of that negative and, bad things happen, how do you start seeing the positive? And my only understanding is that you won't see it unless you believe it too. And so you have to start having some kind of hope that things can get better for things to get better.
Yeah.
So it still is within you to make things happen.
Well, it's funny because I consider myself a pretty optimistic person. But then there's these funny things that pop up that I'm like very, very much, I guess, an antagonist against, like last year we were outside in our yard and we want to pour cement on the side of our yard to like get the parking on there and maybe put a basketball hoop up for the boys. Mm-hmm. Boys are getting older. Each week or each month that goes by, I'm like, by the time they get it, it'll be grandchildren that use it 3 generations down. And I started getting super, super like just put out. And I remember telling you, I'm like, what's the point? Like, we're not going to do this. Why are we even talking about it?
Yeah.
And you're like, you got to be positive. I'm like, I am being positive, being realistic, right? It's just not going to happen. But that's one of those things that when, you start looking at that, of course it's not going to happen if that's the case.
Yeah, if you think it won't, it won't.
And so how long did it take us to get that cement poured? Oh, yeah, it still hasn't. So is it going to happen? I don't know. But
we also have other things that need the prioritize and finances of what needs to come first. So it's not just forgetting about it, but just playing into it realistically about how can we afford it and making it into a plan, a long-term plan.
But if you're projecting into the negative, what are you going to get in return no matter what?
Negative.
100%. Like that. Yeah. I mean, that is 100% going to be an outcome.
So if you want any kind of better outcome, you have to at least put it out there that it's possible.
The other mind hack for preparing yourself for this mental combat that recovery is going to require is creating these power positions for instant kind of confidence. Now, this is a funny thing. Like when I was reading this, I'm thinking, what in the world does that mean?
What do you mean by that?
But there's so many things you can do to create a sense of prestige and power within you that you may not even be even aware of. The first thing is your body language. Right?
Yes.
Now, there's this awesome TED Talk we heard years ago that talked about the power of body language and what it means. So if you're looking like through the lens of like creating a position of instant confidence, what does that body language look like? We've seen this, and we've had our kids do it. I've done it.
Yeah.
Do you remember kind of what she describes as like one of the most powerful, instantaneous power poses you can do before an interview or a conversation is going to be difficult? What does she tell you to do?
It's any kind of superhero pose. If you think of Wonder Woman, if you think of,
for those that are watching, it's standing up, head up tall, hands on the hips.
On the hips, yeah.
Chest out.
Chest big. You just make yourself bigger. She talks a lot about animals in the wild and, gorillas and monkeys. Like the alpha male is the one that shows and is the biggest. He makes himself bigger by standing taller, and and you can see that too as you just talk to people that are shy or maybe have some low self-esteem. They're usually head down, arms hunched over. They just make themselves small, and the ones that are more powerful make themselves big. So standing tall with your hands on your hips in a confident pose for 1 to 2 minutes. You can imagine that, like, I don't know, just that superpower kind of standing on top of, what the Empire State Building, taking in the view, just knowing that you're in control.
it does breed confidence because your body's in line. You feel it. The other thing too is if you're sitting down, to put your hands like in the position behind your head with your elbows pointed out and upwards for like 1 to 2 minutes. And I didn't realize, but I did this a lot where I'd be in group or something and I'd kind of tip back, put my hands behind my head, and I would just sit there and listen. And it was kind of a funny thing. And I thought I was doing it just because it felt good. But what it was really doing was showing confidence that whatever you're saying to me, I understand it. I'm bringing it in. And it was interesting when I figured this out,
to listening,
how much more people would confide because they felt like you know what you're talking about. You have a degree of understanding. Does that make sense? It's one of the funniest things.
And you're just to have an open body language of being open to hearing rather than shut off trying to, look down at the floor or look at your watch or your phone. Right?
It really is the funniest thing. So, listeners, as you're going through life and you're trying to figure this stuff out, there's a lot of these little hacks and whatnot that you can provide yourself to maybe have a better outcome. You'll never know unless you try, unless you invest in it, right?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of these things sound corny and kind of like, yeah, right. But I'm telling you, that is exactly how I got to the point and position I'm in here today. The faking it until I became it, right?
Yeah.
The being able to analyze and to understand my avenues, being able to utilize some of those mind hacks that created, some positivity. And then to refine it to what works for me.
It's so important to look back at situations and scenarios and kind of assess, what did you do? How did I get here? What did I learn? And what can I use moving forward? Just the concept of being able to look at that and process through it helps ingrain what you've done for the next step forward. So oftentimes you do things that you're good at, or you accomplish a goal and then you just move to the next one and forget. And those are helpful. But if you can stop and have, just kind of a check-in with yourself on what did you learn, where did you come from? What can you try to do next? What do you want to stay away from? It's going to ingrain that into more of a long-term memory and something you can apply again and again further each time.
100%. And so, one of the neatest things about all of this is it's a path to take. It's some options you can utilize, but more so it's about, catering it to how and where and why it's going to work for you.
Yeah.
And you'll never know unless you engage in it. Addiction strips away so much of our confidence, and it strips away so much of the authentic self that we once had, that we forget how powerful we truly are. And it's a hard thing to try and reclaim that when you feel so less than, or you feel so detached, or that like you said at the beginning, that scarcity of what addiction has brought into our lives. And then you get that concept of like self-doubt. Are people going to believe this?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter as long as you do. Yeah. One of the funniest things is people always say, when they want to get into recovery, well, this is what I want. I want a better relationship with my kids. I want a better job. I want to be happy.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, because those are all residual effects of you just living clean and sober. You doing the best you can. You living a life that you want. If it's MAT, fantastic. If it's turning into a counselor or therapist, fantastic. If it's getting job, doing hair, nails, whatever, perfect.
Yeah.
It's your life, and we're running out of time, right?
True.
I mean, think about it. I was watching this YouTube video the other day of this lady who had been on the run from the cops for years, living in scarcity, living in and out of her car, suffering from drug addiction, being beaten, abused, abandoned, neglected. And she was so thankful that she's finally going to prison because now she had some stability. Yeah. And the guy that was doing this video was like, I can't even believe this, she just threw her life away. I'm like, not really. Those 15 years of absolute scarcity.
Yeah.
She
learned amazing skills, I'm sure.
Holy cow. But that's the thing, right? This is your life. It's almost over, which is kind of sad, right? I mean, you blink and you miss it. But so
how much more time do you want to continue to waste? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think
in that scarcity,
there's so much to see. There's so much to do. Don't limit yourself. So prepare yourself for some mental combat, and lean into that erase and replace philosophy and see what it can bring you. We get a little blowhardy on that kind of stuff, and I know we're kind of out of time, but any final thoughts for the listeners today?
No, increase your mental toughness, the grit. That's how you get through it.
Absolutely. And we're going to be diving deeper into this subject and a few more things on the Patreon. So remember to keep your eyes on that. And if you're not a subscriber, patreon.com/addicttoathlete. Listeners, continue to watch our website. Hey, we've got lots of cool stuff on there. We got some brand new merch out, and the sweaters, the crew necks are going fast.
Yes, they are.
And they are limited. This is going to be the run.
Previous posts, but they're amazing. Our daughter designed them, and they look great.
Yeah, so it's available right now. If you're not in the Utah County area and you want us to ship those, they are $30. If you're here, they're $25.
Yeah.
But yeah, check that out. You can jump on our website, check out our merchandise store. Anything else, our running jerseys and a few other kind of extracurricular recovery platform we have. But also jump on there and check out our Sober Coach training. You know, Addict to Athlete provides a 40-hour intense sober coach training to where you can certify yourself to become an official Addict to Athlete recovery coach and hopefully open a chapter of this team in your community. We're finding this grassroots level of intervention is working like very well, specifically because of the path that we take by erasing the addiction and replacing it with things of greater value. A lot like what we talked about today. You can find those resources on our website, along with all of the upcoming activities and events we have. As we discussed before, the races that we have are all up for your registration. And listeners, we just really do appreciate all of you being willing to share this podcast and then give your feedback, leave a review. It helps get the podcast out a little further. And until next time, continue to do your best and turn your mess into your message.